Long time no see. It has been, we've had a pandemic, we've had COVID conversations, we started Art Talk, you got a couple of good artists in the area. Do you even know who I am anymore? Because I'm not sure I do some days. But I am RJ Kozain. I host Art Talk for PGH Museums, and we are officially back in the artist studios, talking to someone who you will see in just a moment. Her name is Rachael Caskey, and she's a mixed media artist, specializing in acrylics, digital art, textiles, and it's so encompassed in so many different areas that we have a very, very long conversation in length about how you incorporate all of those things, as well as how you incorporate family, working, and the supernatural and religion. So in just a moment, we're going to sit down as soon as I snap, and she'll be right here.
Our talk is made possible with your support. Become a sustaining supporter at pghmuseums.org/support. And with the support of Doors Open Pittsburgh. Doors Open Pittsburgh celebrates Pittsburgh's unique architecture and history by providing historical tours inside iconic buildings. Find out more at doorsopenpgh.org.
So I guess we can start.
Okay, great.
All right. Hi, welcome to Art Talk.
Hi.
That is a very bizarre thing to say, because the last time that we did this was, I think, coming out of winter 2020 and then slammed into a pandemic. So this is the first time that I'm sitting with anybody in almost 3 years. So,
well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being like the seminal, like we are back at it.
That's right.
For everyone watching and listening, this is Art Talk. It's put on by PGH Museums, and it is a nonprofit in the Pittsburgh area. We have a big website at pghmuseums.org that has a huge interactive map with gallery listings and archaeological sites, an event page. I can't even get into what all of it is because I'm just so excited to talk with you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, we are with Rachael Caskey, and she is a mixed media artist out of the area, Pennsylvania area. And I don't like to tell people what they do. So, hello.
Hello.
And I guess to start, mixed media, what medias do you work in?
I primarily work in acrylics, and I like to use a lot of mark making techniques, which is a hallmark of mixed media. So I use acrylic paints combined with markers and pens and pencils, as well as using non-traditional media like vintage book pages and old ephemera, like old vintage pictures that I'll find at like an antique shop, for example.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Nice. And mixed media is always interesting because you are working with all of these different types of material. Do you think like, okay, I'm going to use a piece of fabric for this, or is it just versus like acrylic to start with? How do you start whenever you're working with so many different things? Sometimes
I have a theme in mind, but other times I don't. It depends on what mood I'm in. But sometimes the media does inform me on what I'm going to make. For example, I did recently make a piece that's hanging on my wall, actually, that I wanted to specifically incorporate fabric. So I started with that in mind on how I was going to use that in my art. So I started with the fabric, and then I thought about, okay, I have certain artists that I look up to, like Jane Davenport, for example, and she does beautiful faces. So this particular piece focuses on creating beautiful faces, and that's what I did with that piece. But I also incorporated sewing into the fabric and painting on the fabric. So you can see that there's different texture that goes along with it.
Yeah, and Jane Davenport, I definitely thought of whenever I was scrolling through your art
Nice.
On your website.
Yes, so you are familiar with her.
Yes,
okay.
For sure. And we're in Pennsylvania, so early Warhol is something that I also saw a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Don't know how much it's influencing, but in your illustrations, it's like very fine line work that you would do with like doodles and sketches.
Yes.
And it's nice to see that style in anybody's art, because usually when you think of illustrations and such like that, and you think the Warhol side of things, you're thinking the pop art and the silk screens and the like videos. And it was nice to see that early style come back. I'm not sure if that was something that if he was an influence at all, or even his mother, because it seems like they both kind of started back and forthing each other as Warhol started developing. But it is really cool to see like fine line work too and doodles, and to see the threads of inspiration.
Thank you. It does inspire me a lot. I like his work. I remember seeing his work at the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, and it's very inspirational. I love the fact that he kind of was making a statement about the art world and what it represented to him, because I read something recently about him that said that they didn't really focus on his roots in the Pittsburgh area. He actually grew up in a very working class family.
Yeah.
That resonates with me because I grew up in a working class family. I would even venture to say not even close enough to middle class. My dad always said, and he would say this, so I'm going to say it on camera. My dad would always say that he made just enough not to get assistance from the state. And it's like he was kind of upset about that, but also proud about it, because I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers I grew up with in a mixed family. My older sister and I were from my dad's first marriage. Him and my biological mother were both in the Air Force. So my older sister was born in Denver, Colorado, and I was born in Sacramento, California, on Air Force bases. So
yeah, and these 2 themes too play into, it seems like, a lot of what goes into the art with location and family. So I like that you brought all of that up, because it does seem like geographically you've been kind of all over the map in terms of where you've been at as far as class goes and working class. And I read about California and time that you spent there versus like the Rust Belt and different locations.
Yes.
Does location play a big role in art on like a level of where you're thinking about it in terms of what you're going to put on the canvas? Or
absolutely. Okay. I recently did a piece based on Amiens in France. I studied abroad in France my last semester of college. I went and did the 5-year plan at Clarion University of Pennsylvania, which now they changed the name to Penn West Clarion. Not a fan of the new name, but
hot takes on Art Talk always.
That's right. But that was 20 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. It was absolutely life-changing for me, because it showed me how there was a different way to live. And I think it's important, if anybody had a chance to see how other people live in different countries, especially with the political climate that we live in today. I feel like we can be very insulated as a country.
Always.
And 20 years ago, through that study abroad experience, I learned that there is so much more out there, and the French people in particular know how to live. I ate the best food that I could over there. I walked everywhere. I lost weight, and I was the happiest I'd have ever been in the longest time. And I actually had more culture shock coming back here to the U.S., starting a new job right out of college, right? Coming back, from France, and everything here was so hectic. I had a ton of just this response, this can't be it. That's what it felt like. And my art allows me to go back to those places in my mind, if that makes any sense. So I pull out those old pictures, and I pulled out the picture of Amiens, and I painted a painting of it, and it took me back to that time when I could just stroll along the Somme River with my foreign exchange student friends and just enjoy the surroundings. And really take in life. And that's how I like to approach my art, is it's an extension of how I feel like life should be approached, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And you combine a lot of religious and spiritual elements as well, and a little bit of the supernatural too. So it's interesting to know that there are pieces of your art that are grounded and rooted in location, and pieces that are just in the other and whatever is going on in the spiritual realm.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a combination of my air sign, because I'm a Libra, or I definitely have religious roots. My grandmother was super religious. Mental illness does play a part in my family, unfortunately, and I'm not scared to bring that up. I think there's too much stigma still around it.
For sure.
I was only diagnosed recently with bipolar disorder, but it's definitely in my family. My grandmother, who was super religious, also had schizophrenia, and she would have these religious experiences, and when she would run away, and I remember being, young and seeing her come back, and she would accuse my grandfather of being the devil, and it was just very scary stuff. And the thing is I remembered those things, and then when I started going through my mental illness, it was like, oh my goodness, it's an interesting experience, because I saw what it looked like from the outside and how scary it looked from the outside, and not understanding it, to being the person experiencing it. And so in order to process a lot of what I've been through, I put that into my art and tried to express it that way.
And I do that as well, too. I struggle with a little bit of anxiety, a tiny bit of PTSD, and I have a family history of, you've brought up schizophrenia. That's a line that I've seen in my family as well. And it's definitely art, I say for sure, is like a processing tool for myself, and feeling for the people I know who are struggling through it. And the more visibility we have for things like this, I think is great. Would you say that when you're making art and thinking about these things, is it something that you're just trying to process viscerally, or do you have concrete?
Well, I had, and this is going into that realm of the supernatural and mystical, but I did have what I would consider visions, and I had forced writing, which also goes along with the psychosis part of it. And so I had one painting in particular that referred back to that, and I called it Mystery Babylon. And it had heavy, heavy emphasis on the end times, which for some reason was also something my grandmother's experiences went through. And I believe from my own experience that you can be spiritual, but also have mental illness. It's not either or. Yeah. To separate those, you're saying, there are different pieces in your life. I feel like all those pieces and all those things in my life is what makes me unique. Everybody has their own personal pieces that they put together that makes them unique. They may have gone someplace else, like Mexico, or, I actually did get to go to Mexico, back when I went on my honeymoon in my previous marriage, but, and I got to see the, ruins at Tulum, and the experience, just seeing, how people could create something so amazing, and yet we look at it from a modern perspective, well, how could they do that? It's I think it's an egotistical thing to think that people back then didn't have the mind capacity to create wonderful things.
I have this conversation a lot with friends and family about how, the concept of even ancient aliens, the fact that people couldn't have built what this show is saying that they couldn't have built. It's inherently it doesn't seem like it's very smart to say it in a very kind of glibby way. But I definitely understand that, and just taking pieces of what you see either from yourself or from other people and throwing it into art, or even just how you go about the day and thinking is, I think, something that everybody does. And even reading through your artist bio on your website, I noticed along the lines of your grandmother bringing up the fact that she did religious poetry and such. And
her poetry was amazing, and her penmanship on top of that, which that's another thing that makes me sad that's going away in America, is penmanship. That's something that defines who you are as a person too. Even if it you think it's poor penmanship to yourself. That defines who you are. But yeah, she would create beautiful poetry and send it into her local religious television stations, and she would be so excited when she saw it on TV. And it's like it's like the equivalent now of us doing TikToks and people seeing them and getting excited. You have that engagement. That was her engagement back then, and that was what made her excited to get off the couch and do something. And that's how I feel about my artwork. It gives me a way of engaging people, and it gives an opening for communication. Like, okay, what does this piece mean to you? And asking me like, okay, where did this come from? This is way off from what your other stuff looks like. So so a lot of my art I do just because it's an extension of who I am and trying to make sense of this human experience.
That is why I think a lot of people do art. Me too. Yeah, I sit there and I'm like, all right, writing my little pop songs, and what are these feelings and what are these emotions and why are they manifesting? Like, I don't have a canvas, but like the metaphorical canvas of what am I thinking subconsciously is like weirdly manifesting out in the world. And it's very nice to see, especially as a finished product, and then to see people resonate with it as well.
Yes.
And the complexities of what comes out too, because you work a lot in like complete contrast. I noticed that right off the bat, down from when we were talking initially about all of the different things that, like, looking at how detailed these paintings behind us are that no one on the camera can see, sorry. But they're like wonderfully detailed with a lot of different elements to them. And even in terms of like your work versus the titles, I was noticing you work with so much color. Everything is so bright. And then you have these really introverted titles. Like there was one in 2020 having to do with COVID. Sweet Isolation was the name of one of them. We had Soul Revival and Defining Boundaries, which is something I've been working on over the past couple of years. So I relate to that title.
Yes.
What is it about working with contrast that inspires you to make something and then just name it something completely like out of this world?
Well, I think part of it is working through the mental illness, for one thing. And there's a part of me that wants people to look deeper than just, this is yeah, or like, this is, or this is a house,
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to always define it for them. I want them to think deeper. Like, what does Sweet Isolation mean in, when she's painting a house, and during COVID? So it's like, go deeper into the painting and what it could mean internally, not just, hey, that's a pretty painting that'll look good above my couch.
Yes. And I like that you bring this up, that you're not spoon feeding people who are necessarily looking at your art, because you're not afraid to say that you are making art sometimes for commissions. I saw that you are open to making art for corporate offices, which when you're looking around a corporate office and you see the art, a lot of what they're choosing is very safe.
Yes, it's very safe, very minimalistic. And a lot of my art is the opposite. So, and I have, I've had this conversation before about making art for art's sake versus making art for the money and catering to your audience, or trying to find an audience and just cater to it. And I think artists struggle with this a lot, including myself, because there is so much inside me that I want to express, but yet, like I said, I grew up in a working class family. A lot of my family, and there's nothing against them, they're very practical, and they see those things and they're like, well, how's that going to sell? It's so esoteric, and they say that in a negative way. And I'm like, well, that's me. That I'm expressing, this is coming from me. And so that's almost like a critique of my own personality. And it's so hard not to take those things personally.
Laying it all out on the floor for everyone to see, like, your emotions seems like it's what you do. It's what a lot of the people that I talk to as well. And so I can definitely see taking like personal slight against what sometimes people are saying.
Yeah.
I know that you're also online too, like you mentioned TikTok. I scrolled through the Instagram endlessly today before I came here looking at everything.
Yeah, I've been on there for a while.
Yeah. Do you notice any sort of feedback from just on the digital side of things too? Like, do you get anything that's maybe more helpful than what you get like sometimes from people who don't necessarily know your art, but know you, but don't get that connection?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I don't want to, sound like, oh, I don't take any critique. But it's sometimes just like, okay, I'm putting this art out here and I want that engagement. I want them to be like, why? What does this mean? Not just like, oh, that's weird. You know what I mean? Like,
asking questions is
like,
important.
why is that weird? Why do you think it's weird? Let's talk about that. But, I have gotten, some engagement. But I think that's, a lot of the digital engagement is just a lot of, like, that's cute, that's nice,
which is valid feedback.
Which is
that
very
feels
valid.
Nice.
It does.
It's the dopamine rush that all the studies are talking about.
Exactly. But it does go back to the same thing where it's like, am I chasing the likes and the engagement, or am I trying to create a conversation?
And at the end of it, do you feel as if even if you have made a piece that maybe you had something in mind, like it was a commission or something, do you feel as if you've still put yourself into it? Because that's something that I will always ask myself, is if I don't feel like I'm there, my stuff gets dragged to the trash bin, your stuff gets primed over. So are you the type that will also think I have to have at least something in here, or
how do we work with that? I love that question because although I do say, yes, I will do commissions, I tell people if I'm doing a commission, I'm doing it in my style. So anyone who knows me and wants a commission should realize that I'm going to do it in my style. I'm not a photorealistic painter. My uncle is. My uncle does paintings to the T. Like, it looks exactly like the picture. His work is amazing. This is the uncle that is on my grandmother's side, the one who does the poems and everything.
So all of the artists
on that side. But actually, my biological mother's side has my grandfather was a painter as well, and she paints. So I get it from both sides apparently. But he does photorealism, and I tell people, if you like, I used to work up in Wexford in insurance, and one of my coworkers, she saw my art and she told me she loved it and she wanted a commission, and I warned her. I said, well, what she wanted a commission of her cat. The warnings are real. Yes, the warnings are very real. She wanted a commission of her cat. And I said, well, I can do that, but I'm just telling you now, I don't do photorealism, because a lot of people they want pet paintings to be like, this is exactly what your pet looks like.
Yes.
Could you imagine going to Picasso and telling them to do a photorealistic painting?
I don't want to know what that conversation would be. I don't even want to think about it. No, I cannot imagine that. I don't want to.
She actually said, she's like, I love your work and I want a painting of my cat in your style. So she still has this commission hanging in her office, and it just, to me, that is just so much reward in and of itself, let alone her paying for it and paying the going rate.
Oh yeah, for
That's
sure.
That's a completely different conversation entirely.
We love money though, but that is another time.
Yes. Everybody should be paid for their expertise is all I'm going to say.
Discounts should be rare. Freebies, never. Where's the Pittsburgh music scene? Anyhow, we're talking about money. We're talking about work. Yes. I like that you are not afraid to say, like, I've worked these jobs. I work these jobs now. I think that's very important, because there's a huge illusion where you're seeing, especially like youth thinking like, when I grew up, I just want to be a famous YouTuber. Or not that I didn't want to be a famous actor. And not that I'm so chasing music now, but you have to have like a realistic expectation of like what you have to do. And there's the luck, and you strike big and all of a sudden you're Britney Spears or you're
Christina.
You're Christina, which we'll get to in a bit. But it's difficult because you and I work jobs. Brian, who's behind the camera, works his ass off. And how how do you find ways to fit in, like being creative amongst, I guess, the societal walls that box us in from the 9 to 5?
Well, if anything, my art does make me break out of that corporate mold. It gives me the freedom beyond those corporate walls, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So, like, especially now, I'm doing a work from home job. It's insurance as well. I have my license. So, I just started this, and it's 9 to 5:30. So now I'm like, okay, this gives me a little bit more structure than I had before. So I work within the confines of that time, and I also have children, so I have to figure out, okay, am I going to work on this while they're here, or am I going to do this when they're not here, because I co-parent, so I have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to that. But now that I have that structure with this new job, I'm like, okay, I can either work in the morning. I'm a night owl, not going to happen.
Me too.
Or I can do this right after work. And that's what I've been doing now. I'll bust out a painting in an hour, 2 hours, 3, depending on how complicated it is. And it's so gratifying to be like, okay, yes, I'm doing this for work, but this I can still do no matter what. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And that feels like it digs deeper into the complexities and the lore of like geographically, everything goes into your art. Like your work and your career goes into your art. Mm-hmm. Your family goes into your art. And I really like that it's just like everything that you are is on the
laying
canvas,
it out
because you don't always get that. Yeah. And like all of the contrasts. And speaking of contrasts and what we brought up a couple of minutes ago, you do have quite the relative.
I do have quite the relative.
RachelCaskey.com. Is that the website?
That's my website.
There is a blog, and it's 10 things you might not know about me. And I was scrolling, and I was like, this is the kind of stuff I like. And I see Christina Aguilera is my second cousin.
Yes.
And but okay, so love, and it was cool to see, because I've done a cover of a song that she's done, Genie 2.0. It's like Genie in a Bottle, but it is not.
Nice.
And mine is even a further departure of that. And then working on that and having to take apart a song, you see the contrast over, like, when you think Genie in a Bottle, you think this fun dance beat and this girl going like this in the music video. Yeah. But at the same time, lyrically, you're talking about, if you want to be with me, you have to respect me and follow like everything that I'm doing. It was ahead of its
time, really.
Yes, and still is. And if someone sits down with me and says, I'm working in contrasts, it's absolutely what I love, because I love dissecting that song, and I loved putting it together in that way, and just making sure that it's not one flat note.
Yes.
So if you ever see Christina Aguilera, or if you have any tales, please tell me, but please relay that message to her.
Oh, absolutely. If I get a chance to. Hey,
Christina.
If my art makes it,
No,
family reunion.
She should be here regardless.
That's
her art has already made it, and we love that impact.
Right. Yeah, I can tell you a couple of stories. So when we were younger, and I hope you remember this, Christina. If you don't, that's fine. I get it. We were young. We used to hang out at her grandparents', I think it was her grandparents' house, or one of the relatives. There were multiple relatives on my grandmother's side. They were Irish Americans, and there were like 15 children. So her grandmother and my grandmother were sisters, and they were not only just sisters, but they were like close sisters. Like they were the sisters that stuck together, if that makes any sense. So they always hung out. And so my dad and her mom, Shelley, grew up together, cousins. And so Christina and I used to hang out in a barn and run around the hay and everything, and just, have our imaginations run wild when we were younger. And then I hadn't seen her for a long time after that. Didn't think anything of her, except my grandma kept talking up about this Christina, my cousin, all the time. And she's like, oh, she's going to Japan and she's doing this. And I'm like, oh, that's nice, Grandma. Didn't even think anything of it.
A traveling cousin, whatever.
Yeah, like, oh, she sings to her stuffed animals. It's so cute. I'm like, oh, that's nice, Grandma. You know, like, I'm like, what about me? Like, you're going to talk about me a little bit?
Right.
Like, you know? And then when Genie in the Bottle came out, I heard it on the radio for the first time. And they're like, Christina Aguilera from the Pittsburgh area. And I'm like, I called up my grandma immediately, like, Grandma, what's Christina's last name? She's like, Aguilera. I'm like,
she's not singing the stuffed animals.
I'm like, you know, she's not, I'm like, she's on the radio. I think I said it like that too. I'm like, she's on the radio. So ever since that, and the thing is it feels weird telling people because it feels like in a way I'm commandeering her, like, you know, I'm name dropping and let it go, hey, guess who I'm related to? But the thing is, who gets to be related to a, you know, international superstar, you know? Like, you can't not say anything.
And the thread of artists.
Yes,
like
the
through the family.
creativity.
It runs so deep and it runs like through the generations.
Yes.
And just like beyond the name dropping, I just like that a person, you see the caliber from like the working class.
Yes.
Building up to whatever class Christina's at.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's very nice to see that spectrum because it's not something that you see too often or at least disclosed.
It really
so
is amazing.
Nice.
I've thought of it from that perspective as well. And that's why I like to share that is because all through that side of the family, there is so much creativity. My other cousins are super like creative. My one cousin, Danny, he does, illustrations, like cartoon illustrations, very vivid. And my other cousin, she does photography. And it's like, it's just amazing to me. They're just like, some families are good at math. This family is good at creativity. It's just, that's what it is.
Yes.
But I'll tell you one other story I have about Christina that relates to Christina. And it's pretty ironic, but
that's Alanis Morissette. But
yes, that's Alanis Morissette, different person. But when I was in college at Clarion University, I got to go to New York City. I went to New York City twice, but the second time was through my communication degree because I have a communication degree and a French degree. And for the communication trip to New York City, they were having like a convention, and we got to stay in the Marriott in downtown Manhattan. And we were invited as the communication class to go to Total Request Live in the audience. Okay. So follow me.
I'm already there.
Keep following me. Okay. So we're in the audience, and my college, friends, they already know I'm related to Christina. Well, wouldn't you know it? They didn't have Christina on there. They had a Christina impersonator.
Even better.
That looked exactly like her, sounded like her. And they're like, shh, you need to say something. Tell them. I'm like, I don't even look like her. I'm like, what am I going to say? Hey, I'm related. They're like,
right?
Sure.
Get back in the audience. Go outside where they're all screaming.
Exactly. So that was my other, that just cracked me up so much. I'm like, okay, God, that's a good one. I'm like, God has a sense of humor because
that's a cosmic joke for sure.
I'm like, that's wink, wink. Yeah, that's hilarious.
Blending in the supernatural and the spiritual crap and all together.
Exactly. Like that is perfect. That is French kiss. Yes. That is chef's kiss.
I love it.
Yes.
So, I mean, I could dwell on Christina all day, but this is about you.
Thank you.
Had a gallery exhibit at the Manos Gallery a couple of months ago. Mm-hmm. What do you have going on now, and what's upcoming?
Okay, well, right now I have some pieces hanging at the Green Beacon Gallery in Greensburg. Okay. And also there's, I gotta remember, Major Stokes bar. It's right down the street from Green Beacon. They have like a kind of a feminist, or they like to hang up a lot of like female art. So I
didn't know this. This is Greensburg?
Greensburg.
I enjoy, because I grew up in Greensburg.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy how far Greensburg has been progressing.
Yes,
so to even hear that there is like this kind of like feminist angle somewhere. I'm going to be there for about 5 million times this month. It's my birthday, so you make the rounds.
Yes.
So I'm going to check that out.
Yeah, so I have some pieces hanging there. I got to meet the owner of Major Stokes, and she said that somebody was interested, but I'm like, well, like, here's my business
Shout out
card.
to Major Stokes, yes.
That's right. So yeah, I have pieces hanging there, and then I have some pieces hanging down here in Manor, PA, at Simply Soups, and they also have they take local people's artwork, and so I've gotten a lot of great feedback on my art down there, and it just fits in perfectly in their space. And apparently, I was told a story. No one has purchased anything there yet, but the owner, she told me that one of the local guys that lives around here, he's well known because he was hit by a train. There's a train tracks. There's trains constantly through here.
Right out the window behind us,
Well,
there's
I guess
indeed
he's
a train
infamous or famous for getting hit by a train and surviving. He's a walking miracle.
Okay.
So apparently he saw my art hanging there, and he asked her if he could, because he said he used to paint before the accident and he stopped. Mm-hmm. And she said that he was inspired by my art and is painting again and wants to put his art down there.
That's what makes all of this worth it.
Yes!
And that's such a lovely note to just end on. I love that.
Yes.
Very inspirational interview.
Thank you.
Very good to have you back, or have us back, and have you be the first person in the seat.
Yep.
Please follow Rachael Caskey. She's wonderful. She's on all the socials. She's online. It's not the last you're going to see of her. Yeah. This is Art Talk. I am RJ Kozain, Brian Crawford behind the camera and the audio, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.